Welcome back to One Spark Stories, the podcast that connects you with innovators, creators, and some unsuspecting risk takers who share about navigating highs and lows, laughter and tears, and how sometimes all it takes is one spark of inspiration to find your way to happiness. This podcast will leave you inspired to take action on your own purpose as we connect, create, and celebrate unique sparks around the globe, once again proving that it's a small world after all. Today we have my friend, the integrator to my visionary self, Heather Havey. Heather has an incredible passion for helping organizations transform their businesses through very intentional systems. She brings guest services expertise combining the art of Disney and the science of GE as a Six Sigma black belt and having spent over 20 years with the Walt Disney Company working across hospitality and financial services. I am so grateful to have her here because as successful as she has been optimizing businesses, Heather is also the person that helps friends take their great ideas beyond that spark of inspiration and actually cross the finish line.
Heather, how are you?
Phenomenal. How are you doing?
I am doing fantastic. It's always exciting when we get to talk, except today we are going to have to limit ourselves. We're very good at sharing our ideas with one another, and it can get lengthy, but we will save everyone.
We definitely add buffer on each meeting.
We do. And that's okay. That's okay because we have plenty to explore, but there are some things about you that I don't know. And we're going to jump right into a couple. We'll call it a pop quiz. We'll dig into that teacher side of me.
Oh, here we go.
Be a little bit of what just igniting a spark, a thought in your mind about you. So I'm going to ask questions. You give me your answer. The first one that comes to mind. So first up, what was your favorite childhood toy?
I played with Barbies a lot.
Yeah. Do you ever look at the progression of Barbie over the years? It's always fascinating. Like, wow. Oh, yeah. I don't know if it's better or worse or where we go. Barbie. Okay, so let's do this one. Disneyland, Disney World, Disney Cruise Line.
Cruise Line.
I know. I won't
just
tell.
Because I've been to Disneyland for a full week. And Disney World, because I'm here, we go for a day here, a day there. But like Cruise Line, detach from everything for 7 days.
See, that's magical. That's the truth. Cruising is the way to go when you want to get away from it all.
I agree. We call it in our family, when you walk across, shoulders down.
Yes.
All the stress goes away, shoulders down.
It truly is a detox. When you get off the ship and it's like, wow, life is good. It is really good. I love that one.
And then you get home and you realize that there's no like French fries at 10 o'clock in the morning.
Right? They don't just bring you a Mickey bar because you have a craving. Yeah.
Struggle is real.
It is. My goodness. Listen to our pains. All right, Heather. So I'm excited. Super Bowl is coming up. And as much as, it may pain you to say Who Dey, because we are evidence that Steelers and Bengals fans can coexist. But let's say we are having a mutually respectful party celebrating the end of football season. What appetizer would you prepare?
I've started eating low carb lately. So before that, it probably would have been like chips and salsa. Mm-hmm. But lately I've started making these mini bell peppers that you put cream cheese on and then everything but the bagel seasoning.
That seasoning, I swear, that is the best stuff on everything.
Put it on everything.
I never even thought about bell
There's
peppers.
no place it does not make sense.
Oh my gosh. Okay. See, just
And
sparking all kinds of thoughts.
I will be rooting for your Bengals this weekend.
You heard it here, folks. I'm going to just say this forever. Well, and we do have to acknowledge that you do have a former colleague and friend that, was on the team. So we can join in solidarity to celebrate the Bengals of past and present.
Well, we also have to acknowledge that the Steelers have 6.
So anyways, the next question.
Okay,
next question. Go. All right. We're getting to the good stuff. So next, what is a big misconception of you?
It was interesting when I led the guest service team at Disney. I was told by a couple of leaders that I was intimidating and that it was because, I'm not that tall. I'm like, well, I think it was 5'10" once upon a time, but we shrank. And I think I just have like a confidence. And so I was told that I was intimidating, like when I would walk the floor of our customer service area of our guest service team, I was told that I was a little intimidating. And then when people got to know me, like I'm all about the relationships. I'm all about my team being a big family. But I was a little surprised that I had heard that from like different people who would not have been the kind of people that would have compared notes with each other. So I thought that was a little surprising. I am anything but intimidating.
I'm going to come back to that because that is a very interesting thought now that I know Heather and know your personality. So we're going to come back to that. Okay. I also was curious though, who would you pick to play you in a movie? So we've got intimidating Heather showing up at the job.
Gosh, who would play me? I can't remember her, Jennifer Aniston, but she'd have to get her hair cut a lot.
I love that Jennifer Aniston has been brought up several times. I love that, like, clearly she speaks to our soul.
Well, my daughter just started watching Friends and she's like binge watching it. So that's probably why it's on my mind.
Yep. Hey, it could be worse. Well, I absolutely love that idea of her because she is a strong, confident woman and has that lighthearted side. And that is so much of what I see in you, Heather. And I definitely want to dig back into that story with the way you were presented. So Heather and I have met through our mutual love of business and entrepreneurial itch just to get out there and try new things. And that Disney, just the love of all things. So Heather, you worked there at Disney. You also worked at GE for quite some time. So if you don't mind just taking us through where you were and just an overview of that journey for you.
Sure.
To kickstart.
So interestingly enough, I don't know if I've told you this, but I started at GE because I was a temp. I worked through a temp agency when I was in college, and I would go back every summer. And after my senior year, when I graduated, I was like, okay, I got to get a real job now. Like I can't go back to the temp agency. And I got a job that I really did not like. And probably the most irresponsible thing I've ever done in my life. I quit over lunch. I went home for lunch and I was with the temp agency still, but it was like a job to become permanent. And I went home at lunch and I called the temp agency and I said, I can't go back. And they said, can you just finish out the week? And I said, no. Can you finish out the day? I said, no. And it's the most irresponsible thing I've ever done. And I called my old boss from GE and I was like, oh my gosh, I just quit a job. And she said that someone there had just left and that their vice president said, when does Heather get out of school for the summer? And she said, well, actually she graduated. And he said, give her the job. So that's how I ended up back there. And I worked in the financial services business. And I did marketing, I did accounting, I did sales support, I did compliance. But really kind of the thing that I got most excited about is GE started getting into Six Sigma. And they had Six Sigma teams, and you could get trained as a green belt, you could get trained as a black belt. And I really loved that. Like, I didn't realize how process oriented I was until I went through that. And then when I would reflect back, I'd go, yeah, that's me. When I first started in that temp job, they sat me down with one of those old green bar computer reports. It was about this thick. And they said, look all the way over to the right and highlight every line where there's a negative number. And I was a temp. I was making, not much money at all. And that's all they wanted me to do was highlight this report. And I literally stopped and I was like, okay, I can't do that. Like, I need to know what this report is. Where did it come from? What do these numbers represent? What does a negative represent? And after I give you the highlighted report, what are you going to do with it? And I realized at that point that, like, I require context. Mm-hmm. And that's part of this whole linear, process orientation is I need to know where things came from and where they're going to go next. So I did that. I worked at GE for about 10 years. And I got gotten transferred up to Virginia from Florida. Then I ended up coming back to Florida to be close to my family again. And I got a job at Disney. And what they really liked was they liked that Six Sigma black belt. So I had gone through the whole process to become a Six Sigma black belt.
So I'm going to call a timeout real quick. Can you?
No,
I want to explain. Could you just real quick explain what Six Sigma is?
So Six Sigma is a mathematical representation. And oh my gosh, I hope I get this right. It's like 3.4 defects per million opportunities. So a company that claims to be Six Sigma means if they do a transaction 1 million times, there will only be a mistake 3.4 times. Now, I'm not going to say that any business that I was involved in was Six Sigma, but it's called a Six Sigma black belt because that's what you're working towards from a process improvement perspective.
Thank you.
So that's what Disney loved, is they loved that I had this Six Sigma background. And I was hired as a productivity manager and manager of labor operations for the sports and recreation business. Hence our connection with Cincinnati. And so I was responsible for getting a productivity target for all of the businesses within sports and recreation, and then working with those leaders to figure out how we were going to meet certain cost savings. And I led the team that did all of the scheduling, the pay for just all of the staffing related issues for my business units. And I did that for a little while. And then I moved into a global productivity role. And then I moved into a global labor role. And then I helped launch the Disney Service Basics. So that was in about 2009. We transitioned from the 7 service guidelines to the Disney Service Basics. And I helped launch that across operations. And then I got laid off. And a lot of people were like, how could you get laid off? This is the most important thing that Disney has going on right now. And I would tell people, like, I wasn't even a smidge bitter about the whole thing. And I said, do you remember there being a 7 service guidelines project team? No, we launched the basics. We were going through a difficult economic time in 2009, and I got laid off with a whole bunch of other people. I got a job for 6 months at another company, which I won't even mention them because I wasn't even there that long. And I got called back to Disney, and the boss that laid me off called me back and offered me the job leading the guest service team, guest communications team. And I did that for anywhere between 8 and 11 years. And the only reason I give that wide of a range is I did it for 8 years dedicated, and then I moved to another role. and kind of kept getting called back to do different type of project work. And that's when my passion for the guest experience really became evident. When I was hired into the job, I was like, I've never done this before. And, my executive, to her credit, said, I know, but you worked for me. I know what you can do. You can do this job. And I ended up loving it. I ended up loving leading an organization that big, impacting the guests through the cast. It was great. And then I got laid off.
Oh gosh. So we're going to come back to that. You just said laid off again. And yeah, unfortunately, I think many people can relate, especially with the ups and downs over the last decade plus. But I want to revisit the guest service team and what you did, because I think a lot of people, they hear Disney and they're like, oh, it's all magic. It's wonderful. And they know that Disney has those guidelines and they understand that Disney is very intentional. I want you to explain a little bit more about what your role and how that played into that magic.
Absolutely. So, things don't go perfect every time. And so my team was sometimes called virtual guest relations, and we were primarily post-visit guest recovery. So we got lots of compliments, lots and lots and lots of compliments. But typically, you think about if you go out to dinner or if you go somewhere on vacation, you're more likely to write if something went wrong. And so people would write and they would tell us what went wrong, whether it was, it was too crowded in the park, or a bus was late, or their room didn't get cleaned, or their favorite attraction was down. And I had a team of amazing leaders and amazing cast members that restored the magic. They, clearly those people came here loving Disney, full of magic and pixie dust, and they went home and it was tarnished a little bit. And so my team turned them around. And, I would tell people, if you wake up in the morning and you go, oh, I have to go listen to complaints from guests, you're in the wrong job. If you come into work every day thinking, I get to turn somebody around, you're in the right job. So it really was amazing. And, even though that most of our mail was negative, if you think about the number of people that visit Disney, very few of them write. Very few of them write. And it was great. And then, to put on top of that, the compliments that you would get, the most magical mail that you would get. Oh, what a great experience. What a great team.
That is so cool. What is one thing that so unfortunately, layoffs came again, you said, and that was within the recent COVID related So again, like many people, leading up to that, what would you say was what really kept your team together? Was it that you had certain initiatives that you were doing, or was it just truly that you felt empowered to make that difference, to connect with the guests at the back end of that trip? Or, what was something memorable that your team was able to do for somebody?
Yeah, I think that it was being empowered. I wrote a blog about this a couple of months ago, but when I first started leading the team, I am very structured, very process oriented. And I had been told that the team needed more guidance on how to handle recovery. And so I interpreted that as a grid that said, if then do this, if this happened, then recover the guest with this thing. And where we ended up was we just wanted to empower our cast to recover the guest situation and make it right, regardless of how they do that. So every guest situation is different. Even if they're both concerned about the park being crowded, or they're both concerned because their room wasn't clean. Depending on how big their party was, were they here for a special occasion? Were they local? Were they annual pass holders? Was it their first visit? The circumstances around their situation was completely different. So we ended up putting together a gridless grid to literally tell our cast to think out of the box. So, I made a grid and then I removed all the lines. And it was basically like, if there's a food and beverage issue, number one, apologize. Number two, thank them for writing. And then here's a bunch of stuff you could think about doing, or whatever you think is appropriate. If it was a transportation issue, if it was a resort issue. And so the cast really were empowered to take care of the guests. And again, I think that's what fueled them, was turning the guests around and knowing that you were going to get to talk to a guest every once in a while who had an amazing vacation helped. But I think it was the, leaders really empowering the cast. And I'm not even going to say it was me. I had an amazing team of leaders who empowered the cast and really embraced them and gave them the tools that they need to make a difference.
Yeah. I can, as you're saying this, I'm thinking, that is one thing that I always valued about the time when I worked down at the parks. When I was at Hollywood Studios, then it was Disney's MGM Studios still, but I knew what I was capable of doing for guests. And even though we didn't have guidelines, we didn't have do this, you can only do this. A lot of people reference if a kid drops their ice cream, you can get them a new one. But it truly was the ability, because Disney was so intentional in their training. They made sure that you knew the expectations and you knew that guests were there we were there to make happiness, create happiness for all. And so whether it was sliding a little certificate, celebrating something in their bag when they would purchase, or walking them over to find a character, and even that
giving them a
5-minute walk. Yes, which now buttons are everywhere. It's those little things that truly are the big things. And I know the notion is don't sweat the small stuff, but when you're in that guest service role, it is that small stuff that will redeem a situation. So I love that, it's true across all casts. If you're on stage or backstage, if you are management or not, do you as you go out, so you were laid off, your journey has pivoted. It really, that's what brought us together. So I'm selfishly excited about it. But as you are exploring new places and, still having your conversations within the Disney world, within different companies, are you noticing that intentionality and that customer guest service focus is something that others are really hyper focused on in the way Disney is, or do you feel that's something evolving?
I think that they want to be. So I get a lot of, oh, you're from Disney. You worked at Disney, so a lot of companies, think that the magic is magical, and it's not. Like, any company can do this. It just takes focus. You have to be really purposeful about it. So, when I talk to people, I feel like I have this balance of that really analytical side and the magical side. And I feel like bringing the analytics to the magic kind of amps it up even more. So yeah, I've definitely heard, companies who have said, we want to be more magical. We want to really take the customer experience to the next level. And, things like understanding that the experience is so much a part of it right now. Coming out of COVID, it's the experience that's the differentiator. And your customers, your guests, your clients, your patients, whatever you call them, have options. And so, even if it's a commodity product, what's going to make you stand out is the experience and how you make them feel. So some of the best pieces that I would get when I was leading that guest service team was the compliments I would get from my own team. And to know that someone wrote in and had something go wrong with their vacation. And, in their letter, they'd written Disney off, like, nope, I'm not doing this again. And then you would get a letter back that would say, I can't wait to come back again. I can't wait to bring my family again. And, because your cast member made the difference for us, we're excited to come back and vacation at Disney. So, that's really what it's all about.
Yeah, I love that, because I think so often people think customer experience, they are here, how can we make it great now? And it stops when they leave, but it doesn't end. You want them to return. You want them to make sure that they're recommending you to other places.
Right.
You need that recovery piece as much as you want to strive for excellence. It might not always happen. And it may just be expectations have been set way up here. I know from the travel work I've done, people go into it with, this is my one big trip and it's got to be the best. And you never want to say, well, simmer down there, friend. But at the same time, when we set that expectation up, be it a job, a vacation, a friendship, anything, and then it doesn't live up to that made up assumption that it's going to be that great, you better be ready to recover it. So I love that you have seen that and seen the value behind it.
Yeah. And I would tell my team, the worst experience you're going to have is when you have to recover the recovery. Yeah. If you don't do it well, you may not get another shot at it. You're lucky. I mean, that's what I would think is, if a guest wrote to us, they're giving us another chance. They're telling us, there's still a chance I might come back. Yeah. But if you screw that up, the very few times that I had to talk to a guest because they had a bad experience during the recovery process, those are the most painful. Those are the most painful calls. Yeah.
Yes. I can only imagine. It's funny because you said you bring the analytics to magic, and when you combine those, and when you said it, it sparked a thought in my head of the first time you and I met, and when we had a phone call, and it was really the writing on the wall, because we talked probably an hour or two. I just remember that we couldn't stop having this conversation. But the thing that stood out to me is how you were very analytic. And in my head, I never thought intimidating, but I definitely thought, wow, this woman has her stuff together. She is passionate. She gets it. And she is going to make sure it happens. And it's fascinating to me, as you're talking about the guest recovery, the essentially dealing with the crummy stuff, you continue to smile. And I love that about you, Heather. You just are able to say, hey, here's the facts. Here's the process we can take. Whereas there's me who's like, but look at the shiny star. We could get there.
Well, all right, let's talk about, okay, I agree. You can get there. But Katie, let's talk about the process. How are you going to get there?
See, these are why calls take forever. No. I love it. That's awesome. Well, so the 3 pillars of One Spark are connect, create, and celebrate. And I've heard so many little sprinklings of each of those. I want to go back to connect though, and think, what is something that, or someone, an experience or a person that you would say was a big spark in change for you? So maybe it was either GE when you had that momentary aha, like, oh, I have systems, or Disney. Was there a person or a moment where you went, wow, this is connecting me to a new opportunity or a new way of looking?
Yeah. I would say probably an experience that made me think differently was, I have to think back. It was 10 years ago. I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And, I was positive throughout that whole thing. My my kids were younger then, and I was like, it's no big deal. It's no big deal. Like, they're going to go in, they're going to take it out. Everything's going to be fine. And, that's not how it went. It was a little more difficult and challenging than that. And at the same time that I was diagnosed, my dad was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And he died one day less than a month after he was diagnosed. And I just thought, like, you just don't know. Like, he had pancreatic cancer. I did all the research, and it was in August. Well, he was diagnosed in July. And I remember telling my husband, like, I'd looked up, all these famous people, and I said, I can't believe this could be my last Christmas with my dad. And he was gone in a month. And, I just thought, between his journey and my journey, you got to just go for it. You just have to go for it and be thankful. So you just have to be thankful. You just have to be thankful for what you have, and don't waste time. Let's do it. Let's do it. And how many times have you and I said that, just in the last year that we've known each other? Hey, I'm thinking about this. Hey, I'm thinking about, just do it.
Yes.
Let's do it. Let's go. Let's get it done.
And I will never forget when we had a call where you were like, I think I'm going to pivot. I think I'm going to change. And in that moment, I was so excited for you, but in my head, I'm like, how can I model this? How can I have the strength of this woman to say, just do it? And it truly, it was then that it kind of sparked that moment in me. Like, you know what? Why can't I? Here, Heather's been knocked down pretty hard, and she continues to get back up and move forward. And why not live that? So it's one thing to think and feel a certain way, but you truly do live that. And so
you're very sweet.
Honoring your dad and your experience at that time, you really are living it and leading others to create that new opportunity and new experience. So I
love that you've been pivoting. You've done a lot of pivoting in the last year. And, I think that's the other thing is, like, you can't be afraid. You can't be afraid to fail. And you can't, when you pivot, like, I used to think that pivoting my life, pivoting my career, pivoting anything meant that I failed in the direction that I was going in.
Yeah.
And it really isn't. Like, I haven't gone this way and then this way. It's like, I've gone this way and then I've gone this way. And then I've got, like, it's been like these minor pivots that I've made. And every time I just think, like, okay, learn something.
Yeah.
And, I think that's what you have to take for it is, you start off in one direction. You're like, that's not exactly what I thought it was going to be. Or, you know what, I'm okay at this. I'm actually kind of good at it, but it's not what lights me up. It's not what, makes me on fire and want to wake up in the morning. And, the minute that you figure that out, that, that you want to lead people and you want to bring that, bring the business and the relationships and the analytics and the leadership all together, then you have a spark.
Yes.
And you realize, like, I know what I need to do next.
Yeah. Well, and so I'm going to go back to another story that just to show when you manifest something, when you put it out in the universe, it's wild what happens. But we were talking about, I had recently had coffee with Lee Cockrell, who was former vice president of operations at Disney, and you had worked under Lee's leadership. And you were like, I just truly have never sat and talked to him. And it's what I need to just reach out to him. And I kept going, Heather, just do it. Just do it. Go email. He is so kind and willing. Just go for it. And then you text them like a couple of days later and you're like, you will never believe who I saw at a funeral and just scheduled coffee with. And I thought, how wild is it that we throw out there, this is the next step. This is the next conversation to be had. And then there you are standing there having a conversation. We need to remember the power of wanting something to happen and then just being more intentional with making it, putting that person in our sight
And I think it's, but then also being open enough to have a plan, but being willing to realize that there's more than one option. I think that there's one thing to be intentional, being like, I am doing this. Blinders on, not looking at everything else. I'm doing this. And I tell people, the story that I heard once about, the man whose house was flooding, and a car came by and said, jump in. And he said, no, God's going to save me. Boat came by, jump in. No, God's going to save me. A helicopter came by, jump in. No, God's going to save me. Then he died, and he got to heaven. God, what happened? And God said, I sent a car, I sent a boat, I sent a plane. So right? I've had that in my brain for the last, 6-9 months. Yeah. And I was like, I know what I'm doing. And then all of a sudden I'm like, is that a car that just went by? Was there just a boat that I should have paid attention to? I think that might have been a helicopter. So I started realizing that your future comes in many different shapes and sizes.
Yes. And it is no longer that linear path. It's no longer drop your resume off. It truly is a matter of having conversations. If you and myself and an abundance of other people listening, and everybody here probably has a moment where they think, wow, if I had been closed off, this never would have opened that door.
Right.
This experience, I couldn't have even imagined. So you're spot on. We cannot limit that opportunity. And when we have a spark, to assume it has to be this person, or it has to be this company. So many people want to work for Disney. And it's interesting. I had Cassie on recently with another episode, and she was talking about how when she left the college program, she was basically told, you won't be able to get back in to Disney. You left. And yet now she's working alongside Lee Cockrell and Dan Cockrell. And she's like, it's just wild that now I work with former leaders and help them spread the lessons and learnings in a different way. And
I love
she's
that.
even more empowered to do so. So it's just, you have shown that you can create your own opportunity, still in line with that North Star. Just be open to trying it a little differently.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Heather, I want to really focus on this last pillar, the celebration. So what is something about you that I can think of a couple. First of all, did you say 10 years since your diagnosis? Okay, that's a huge celebration. We cannot even pretend that we're not going to throw that one out there. So what else could we celebrate with you that maybe we haven't touched on, or that you're just very proud of within yourself?
I think my family. Yeah, my family. So after I got laid off, the whole COVID thing, like you ask anybody like, oh, when did you get laid off? It's like, well, I was furloughed, and then I was told I was going to be laid. Well, I was furloughed, and then my furlough was extended, and then I was told I was going to get laid off, and then I was laid off. But it was a wild 9 months, and my family was just so strong. My husband works for Disney too. That sounded weird because I don't work for Disney, but my husband works for Disney.
It never goes away, Heather. It just really doesn't.
But my husband works for Disney. He's been working from home for the last 2 years. I have a 12-year-old and a 21-year-old. And when COVID first hit, we were all home together for a good 6 months. And, my son's now back at school, at college, and my daughter is, she's been in-person school for the last, 2 years, year and a half. And, they've just been troopers and super supportive of me and, whatever wild hair I get in terms of what it is that I want to try. They've been so supportive, and, I just celebrate them.
I love that.
My village.
Them, they
my
are
village,
everything.
my family, my friend. And I've been thinking about it. Like, I have gotten to connect with so many people like you and reconnect. I have a friend who I worked with at GE, and she's the one that got me to come to Disney. So I've known her for over 20 years. And we reconnected about 9 months ago. And we realized that once she recruited me to Disney, we're not sure we ever saw each other face to face after that. And I was at Disney for 20 years. So we hadn't seen each other in 20 years. And we've now had breakfast together once a month for the last 6 to 9 months. So it really is, like I say, it's all part of the journey.
Yes, it is. And it's a wild, weird world, but it is always amazing seeing it come back full circle. It always does. What's a great motto you could leave us with? I feel like you are full of many and already given plenty of little thought nuggets, but what is a motto of Heather's that we can walk away with?
Just keep swimming. It's going to be Disney.
Love that one. Yes. It's perfect. Well, thank you so much, Heather. I can probably think of like 10 other questions. I would love to dig into what those I'm really just curious about what was the weirdest guest service complaint that may have came through. Is there anything that you could share as a final ad?
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, there's a lot of ways to define weird. The weirdest guest situation I ever dealt with was a woman whose bus from Disney Springs back to her resort ran 40 minutes late. And she not only wanted her entire vacation refunded, she wanted her airfare refunded, and she wanted me to refund her for the merchandise she bought the next day because she had impulse shopped because she was so tired.
My Lanta, if that could be a real thing.
I know.
Whoops, got a little stress shopping done again today.
Yeah. That's probably the weirdest, demanding situation. And I used to always tell my team, if somebody really had a bad experience, those are easy to handle because you want to make it right.
Yeah.
It's the people who feel entitled for something far beyond what's reasonable that are difficult.
That was beyond the gridless grid. Sorry, ma'am. We actually did have a grid line that fell.
No, you do not get the whole grid.
Oh, that is, wow. But yes. Always something, right? The joy of working with people.
I know, doggone people.
But again, we say it with a smile because it is truly the best. So
it is.
Thank you, Heather. We will definitely have to do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you know that pound for pound hamburger costs more than car?
Later, Tater.